twilight 19th century, amid the burgeoning spirit of scientific discovery, a renewed fascination with ancient wisdom, Theosophy emerged as a profound synthesis of esoteric knowledge and scientific inquiry. Far from being a mere eclectic amalgam of religious doctrines, Theosophy embodies the quest for understanding the hidden dimensions of existence, weaving together the threads of mysticism, philosophy, and empirical observation into a tapestry of universal truth. Rooted in the ancient wisdom traditions of East and West, from the Vedic sages of India to the Platonic philosophers of Greece, Theosophy seeks to illuminate the underlying principles that govern both the seen and the unseen realms. It is the sacred science of exploring the metaphysical architecture of the cosmos, revealing the intricate connections between the material and the spiritual, the finite and the infinite. Helena Blavatsky, a visionary mystic and scholar, brought Theosophy into the modern era with her seminal works, Isis Unveiled and The Secret Doctrine, challenging prevailing paradigms with a cosmic vision that transcends orthodox religion and material science. In theosophical thought, the evolution of the human spirit mirrors the grand cycles of cosmic evolution. Just as Darwin's theory of natural selection unraveled the mysteries of biological development, Theosophy elucidates the spiritual ascent of consciousness through successive incarnations and planes of existence, guided by the immutable laws of karma and reincarnation. Theosophists employ rigorous meditation, contemplation, and ethical living as their laboratory tools, seeking direct experiential knowledge of the divine. Embracing both the rational and the mystical, Theosophy invites seekers to embark on their inner alchemical journey, transforming the leaden ignorance of the mundane mind into the golden wisdom of spiritual enlightenment, thereby bridging the ancient and the modern in a harmonious quest for ultimate truth. I think for a long time when I classified masculine theory and what it fundamentally is a marriage between my love of Eastern esoteric practices and the more grounded scientific, empirical, objective knowledge that we find in the West. And in that way, Theosophy is a perfect description of what masculine theory is. I wanted to read to you as Theosophy pertains and starts to explore into the areas of sexual continence and what they see as a foundational practice in order to start to weave that thread, that tapestry, into something that goes beyond our surface level understanding of the world. So, Theosophy. The sexual relation is a thing to be put aside the moment a person becomes wise. And that is from Blavatsky in The Secret Doctrine. Theosophy, the highest summit of thought which the human mind has reached, has existed since the most ancient times, wherever a human consciousness was able to grasp a knowledge of divine realities. Through the ages, it has found different expressions in different philosophies and religions, which are but cloaked embodiments of the same eternal truths. Seeking to give a more direct, unveiled expression to those truths, the Theosophists of antiquity showed how the bonds of the senses could be broken and the human soul set free. They showed how each one who so wished might, while in the physical body, verify some of life's basic and factual laws. At the same time, Theosophy always showed that a condition of purity far transcending any popular ideal of such virtue was the absolute and all-essential basis of spiritual insight and attainment. So we have more continuity, more consistency in this notion that in order to embark upon the spiritual journey, the passions have to be nullified, they have to be transcended. I have a let's say ambivalence with the word repression, because I believe repression is unhealthy, and we'll allude to that later on in the chapter in parts of Theosophy in which I think they don't get quite right, and maybe some other practices, some other ideologies, some other circles such as maybe Brahmacharya have a more comprehensive understanding of integration and transmutation as opposed to repression of the senses. It's about being efficient with our energies and where we're fundamentally placing them. If we're finding that we're placing a lot of our votes in the energies of something like the senses, something like lust, something like the kinetic sensation, the passions, the pleasure element, then of course we're going to find ourselves lacking in our assets in order to fuel acquisition of divine spiritual knowledge. So in that way, we're kind of recouping the energy that would otherwise be spent on in indulging and exploring the sensual realm, and putting it back into the spiritual organs, as Rudolf Steiner would say, and develop a connection with divine and God. So the founder of the modern Theosophical movement has not failed to lay enormous stress on the need for sexual purity for those who would seek an understanding of life's deeper varieties. It is obvious to anyone who knows anything of Madame Blavatsky's writing and of Theosophical teachings that their whole tendency is towards the destruction of the sex impulse instead of towards its deification. So it's really, really interesting how that is phrased, the deification of the sexual reflex. When you look at the modern world, when you look at, social media, we have deified, we have made sex our God. It is the highest value on most man and woman's life, well, especially men's life. I can only speak from a masculine kind of perspective here, but when I take myself into when I was at university, I was on all the dating apps. I was always trying to connect with other women in my educational context, at lectures and, at study groups in the library. Everything in that kind of realm always revolved around the prospect of sex. So in that way, sex was kind of my God. It was my deity. It was my North Star. It was everything that I was moving towards. And in that time, I would have self-described myself as an atheist, because if I couldn't understand it via the 5 sentence, then it wasn't real in my personal opinion. But then you begin to understand there are senses beyond the physical ones. There are spiritual organs that allow you to interpret and understand and experience God in that way. But men are, so that was a state of immaturity for me. I was still going through a kind of puberty, and I was at university when I was like, I went quite late. I took 2 years out. So maybe like in my 20s, I was a little bit older, maybe 1 year older than anybody else. And I was probably the most immature individual there. And in that way, that speaks as, a testament to my deification of my sensual pleasures. And I think most people would agree that they have this kind of bout after puberty. They have this kind of period in their lives where that sexual reflex is running them. It is their God. It is their deity. And the next step in your evolution is nullifying that, or at least recouping the energies otherwise used to experience that deity to a metaphysical one, to something higher, something more divine, something more grandiose. She taught that the practice of moral and physical purity develops self-illumination. She listed abstinence among the conditions under which alone the study of the divine wisdom can be pursued with safety, and mentioned it as one of the most efficacious means of preparing the reception of higher wisdom. She pointed out that this wisdom cannot possibly be obtained unless one first kills the passions of the physical to call to life the perceptions of the spiritual man. She called sexual action the greatest impediment in the way of spiritual development, and she made it very clear that sensual self-gratification involves the immediate loss of the powers of spiritual discernment. For such discernment, serene harmony is a prerequisite. And how can harmony prevail when the soul is stained and distracted with the turmoil of the terrestrial desires of the bodily senses? It is only when all the lusts of lungs of the flesh are dead that the union with the higher self can take its place. Since this union can and must be effected during one's physical life, the passions must first die before the body does. And the reason why I think you have to have a kind of spiritual understanding, a spiritual identity, is because it is what is true fundamentally. I've often said, and I learned this through my own experience and a culmination or an amalgamation, pardon me, of reading spiritually inclined books and scripture and other resources, that you are not your body and you are not your mind. And the reason why I can say that with my chest with certainty is that you can experience the body and the mind and not be tied to the fate of its outcomes. What do I mean by that? Is that you can have a thought and not identify with it. You can have a feeling and not identify with it. Therefore, if there's a disassociation with the thought and the feeling, then what fundamentally are you? And what you fundamentally are is a witness. It is almost like a third party from the body and from the mind. And the third party is described in many different religions as soul, pneuma, Atman, witness, observer. It is what you fundamentally are. You know, you're getting into deep territories here, but this is the truth of our kind of experience. It's that old trite saying is that you're having a human experience from the identity of a soul or a spirit or the breath, the breath within the breath. And what Theosophy is trying to describe here is that if you don't know that, you kind of do yourself a disservice to the majesty and the creativeness and the grandeur of what you fundamentally are. Most people believe that they are their bodies and they are their mind, and that's a kind of redundant idea. You are so far beyond that. And to believe that you are only in service to your body, which is gratification of the senses through sex and through food, is so it falls so short. It falls so short of what you are. And that's in many ways Blavatsky's frustration with modern people, is that they don't recognize how powerful they are. And in many ways, maybe they're scared. Maybe they're scared of that power. And when you recognize it, once you feel it, there's no going back. And then it becomes a grueling process to kind of discipline the body and the mind, discipline the thought, discipline the feeling, and use that energy and re-divert that energy in order to actualize spirit. Such are but a few of Blavatsky's numerous unequivocal pronouncements of the subject of sexual purification. They found an echo in much of the theosophical literature, especially in the earlier days of the new movement. There it was emphatically stated that spiritual culture is only attainable as the demands of the flesh are subordinate to the aspirations of the higher. So the flesh has to serve the spirit. The flesh have to serve the spirit, not the spirit serving the flesh. That is backwards. It was recognized that whenever one experiences these higher moods, perfect chastity seemed indeed an absolute condition of self-realization. It was realized that passions dim man's knowledge, that he is an immortal spirit, and therefore repression of desires is absolutely necessary for the spiritual progress. So this is where I'm going to be finicky here about the language and the parlance that Van Vliet has used here. I don't believe repression is what he means here. I believe integration is what you mean. Repression is not using energy with any kind of utility. It's kind of forcing it into a corner and not letting it express itself. And in that way, that's where neurosis starts to manifest itself. In fact, many individuals who start to go on this journey of exploring and experimenting with sexual continence typically suppress or repress their energy without integrating it. You have to use this energy and create new reference points in how you use this energy through transmutative avenues such as meditation, such as yoga, such as breath work, such as exercise. All of this energy can be used to facilitate some of the very spiritual work, because I believe a lot of this is spiritual work, what you're doing, especially exercise is spiritual work. It's kind of celebratory it's celebrating the body is what I'm trying to say here, but repressing it is going to turn into some illness and it's not going to be healthy for you. At an advanced stage of the soul's development, when men reach true spiritual life, sex becomes nothing. The entire forces of their nature are then transmuted into spiritual energies. But before attaining that stage where the sex impulse is overcome, the war between spirit and matter will last till man adjusts his outer self to his spiritual nature. Till then, the dark and fierce passions will be at feud with the divine man. Undoubtedly, the animal will be tamed one day, but not until each one individually undertakes the taming. Then, with every effort of the will towards purification, the spiritual entity of man is drawn higher and ever higher. Thus, as to the process of spiritual development, Theosophy teaches the control of fleshly appetites and desires. It bases this teaching on a unique and profound system of occult and spiritual science, including an unusual theory of evolution. Thereby, it puts the ideal of purification on a deeper foundation that can be found anywhere else. And this particularly makes me think about this really interesting idea that when we're going through puberty, or let's say up into the stage of puberty, we're sexually inactive. And it kind of speaks to, well, what is that energy then being used for? And that energy is used for evolution, for growth, for maturation. And in many ways, when we start to embark on a period of continence, we start to go through another puberty, go through another stage of maturity, go through another stage of evolution. So if you're ready to go through your second stage of evolution, it's all here in the foundational and the premise and the doctrines of Theosophy. What do you think? Are these theories, are these facts? Let me know. Speak soon.